I will, if you are okay with this organization, we can discuss after the presentation, and we will have about 10 to 15 minutes to discuss at the end. And I would propose you to do kind of a snapshot of different fields I am interested in my research, in my clinical practice as a psychiatrist, in the light therapy in patients, mostly with depression or with bipolar disorders. So here are my conflicts of interest. And first, I would like to underscore two verbatims of patients that nicely, in fact, illustrate the different effects of light which we are using in clinical practice. So first one, and I changed the names, of course, is a patient who suffer from seasonal affective disorder. And she sent me this message. I use the device with a white light. I felt almost immediate benefits on the quality of my sleep after a few days of use. It's very impressive. Most patients, in fact, observe first changes during their sleep or circadian rhythms with a sleep phase advance, which is really impressive for them. For instance, they can describe to wake up earlier than they are used to do. I already have much more energy in the morning, and I notice that my chronotype has shifted a bit even on weekends. So I educate her, in fact, between the social jet lag between the week and weekends. So she was telling me that the chronotype shifted also during the weekend. And so now my husband is jealous and has started using the lamp too. This was funny at the end. And another patient who has a bipolar disorder type 1 and was, after a lot of manic episodes, suffers then from mostly depressive episodes with some resistant episodes. And so he explained here the idea that light therapy could cure me of a latent depression lasting over 30 years since I was 25, especially through a form of light therapy that seemed more like a gadget than a hospital procedure, appeared fanciful. Yet the psychiatrist was immediately convinced, and more importantly, I convinced myself just as quickly that my participation in the research protocol could heal me. So these patients participate to the phase 1, phase 2 protocol of introduction, initiation of light therapy in bipolar patients. From the very first morning session in spring, so here is also interesting because we have only the idea that light could be used during a dark period, during winter, but in fact in spring or summer, it could be also used with a bright intensity and a regular prescription each morning. Discreetly at the office, I felt an indefinable sense of well-being. Each session had the effect of an invisible and mysterious hand guiding me towards recovery. After 3 months, it was there. I was still myself, but with seemingly perfectly natural mental tone, ready to consider life differently. So here, he feel, and most patients, in fact, will respond, even partially, feel during the first days kind of an effect. Sometimes so this is on sleep, sometimes this is regarding a smooth change on the energy like this patient. And this one was in remission after 3 months of treatment. And a year and a half already, and antidepressant significantly reduced, so he's in remission during 1.5 years. The idea to use light is really not a new idea, even if the neurosciences, in fact, kind of lead to a reborn of this chronotherapeutic. But this is one of the most old treatment we have. The mother of the today's bright light therapy is the heliotherapy. So this is the sun therapy, and this is described since the first very medical description we have from Hippocrates, from the Chinese, the Hindu, the Egyptian medicine. So over like 15 centuries before Christ. And this is the invention of the electric light bulb and the progress of medicine that conducted the heliotherapy to shift for the light therapy and the phototherapy then. So the difference of the two, the light therapy is deprived for ultraviolet, and the phototherapy has ultraviolet to treat, and this is still used also today in dermatology, immunology, or neonatology. And bright light therapy is today the gold standard treatment for seasonal affective disorder, of course, but also for the other affective disorders. And this is part of the therapeutic international guidelines for the major depressive disorder, unipolar or bipolar, other sleep disorders, and we will briefly talk about that, and the premenstrual syndrome. The rebirth of bright light therapy or light therapy, in fact, comes from the neurosciences. And this is not so often clear. We believe this is a kind of a tendency we have today, and so there is tendencies like that over time. But this is really from the neurosciences discoveries that we have a re-interest in light therapy. Particularly in psychiatry and sleep medicine, and the first scientific evidence of the possible effects of light on mood was provided by the observation of Ware and his colleagues in 1979, who observed that the modification of biological rhythms could have an antidepressant effect. And this first observation was made in a context where, in the same period, Levy and his colleagues reported in 1980 that light inhibited the secretion of melatonin and thus modifies circadian rhythms. So between these two discoveries, there is only one step, and it does not take very long for Kripke and Levy to confirm the antidepressant effects of light with these changes in biological rhythms in unipolar, bipolar, and seasonal depression. And after, there is, in fact, the famous case series in 1984 of Rosenthal, and this is really this publication who conducted to other clinicians to prescribe light therapy, mostly in seasonal affective disorders and then in other depressive subtypes. So I think you are all very aware of that, but so I will do it very, very briefly. But you know that humans, like other species, adapt their biological rhythms with a master central clock, which is located as the anterior part of the hypothalamus. And this central clock, which are here because it is a group of nuclei, the suprachiasmatic nuclei, that are very, very conserved between all species. Even the Drosophila has the same nuclei. And another very important brain structure is the pineal gland, which is secreting the melatonin that can be considered as a dark or night hormone. This central clock can adapt with environmental signals that are received by peripheral clocks. And the most important one, and the most important synchronizer is light. And there are a lot of, there are photoreceptors on the retina that respond to light and transduce the signal to these suprachiasmatic nuclei and stimulate this nuclei. The effect of seasons is linked to the photoperiod, which can be defined by the period of daylight in every 24 hours. And the seasonal rhythms are also coded by these peripheral and central clocks. And in both clocks, these rhythms are controlled by what are called core clock genes that code for clock proteins with positive and negative feedback loops responsible for biological rhythms in all mammals. Here with Julia Marwani, we summarize the two distinct retina brain pathways for the effects of light on mood. A first well-known pathway, which is dependent from the suprachiasmatic nuclei. So we call this pathway the suprachiasmatic nuclei dependent pathway. Just after that, we will see that most of the effects, probably not all the effects, and rods and cones in the retina are also contributors of this effect, but most of these effects are going through the intracyclic photosensitive retinal ganglion cells and activate the suprachiasmatic nuclei, synchronizing the biological clock, which has some effects on mood. But we very quickly observed that the antidepressant effects poorly correlated with the synchronization of this clock. So we very quickly understand that there are probably other pathways between the light and retina and the mood effects. And with very, very recent discoveries the last 10 years, we observed direct pathways between the retina and other regions. So anatomically, the retina is connected with other regions. And so we summarize here these regions, and we will detail them a little bit later. But some of these regions, like the habenula and some limbic systems, are directly controlling and participating to the mood regulation pathway. So there are direct effects that are independent of this suprachiasmatic nuclei. These effects are responsible of the increase of the sleep pressure in the part of the homeostatic system, an increase of the alertness, and an effect of regulation of emotions. All these effects are interrelated and participated to the mood. Very important publications from Legates published in Nature 10 years ago. And they try to look at if aberrant light has an impact on mood. And for that, they use two cycles, T24 and T7. So T7 is an aberrant light cycle with 3.5 hours period of light and 3.5 period of darkness. And the T24 is something usual. First, they observed here regarding the expression of the PER2 gene in the suprachiasmatic nuclei that there is a rhythm, both, as you can see here, in the T24 and T7 exposures. So the circadian rhythms are preserved as the expressions of this gene in the liver, as you can see here, 1, 7, 13, and 19 hours for both exposures. So there are, of course, a change of light cycles, but there are no changes of the amount and architecture of sleep and no changes in the circadian timing system. But when you have aberrant light cycles, there are direct effects on mood. And so this is mice models. So in mice, mood is compared or assessed with the sucrose preference. So mice like sucrose, and the more you are consuming sucrose and the less depressed you are, something like that. And here is a four swimming test. The more you are active and the less you are depressed. So when you increase your immobility, the more immobile you are, the more depressed you are. And if you are like manic, you are fighting against the first swimming test. So what you can observe here is that on both situations, the T7s were more depressed than the usual T24 hours. They also observed that the corticosterone level of this T7 exposure mice were higher. So this is also associated with more depression, more stress than the T24 hours. So you can see that irregular light schedules directly affect mood in the context of normal sleep that are preserved and circadian rhythms. And second important message of this publication is that the mice that are lacking these retina ganglion cells, the EPRGCs I detailed you just before, the mice lacking these retinal cells showed a significant preference for the novel object when housed both in the T24 and T7 light cycles. And here, regarding the four swimming test I just detailed to you, both mice, again, performed similarly in this swimming test. So to have a difference of effects of lights, you need these EPRGC cells to affect mood. So this is what I was detailing to you before. Most of the effects on mood of light through the retina are thanks to these intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. So here, and this figure is a summary we did with Julia, but it is like all figures, partially too simple and partially true. So these cells, in fact, has direct actions or connections with, so the suprachiasmatic nuclei inhibits the ventrolateral preoptic center and stimulate alertness. They are also connected with monoaminergic systems and some emotion regulation system, like the dorsomedial hypothalamus dorsal area or the hypothalamus paraventricular dorsomedial and lateral hypothalamus systems. And there are also very interesting studies looking at these hypothalamus neurons and ganglion cells. So in clinical practice, what are the light parameters we can use? Briefly, there are different effects to clearly have in mind before prescribing a treatment. And we think that probably light is mostly underused because physicians are not educated to the circadian effects, at least in France. The timing effect is one of the first effects to consider, and an exposure to light at the end of the day delays the clock. It is like screen and blue and rich screen during the evening that delay this sleep phase cycle, and late night or early morning exposures advances, on the contrary, the clock. Here, it's could seem complicated, but in fact, it's not complicated. It's simple to understand. There are phase response curves to light and melatonin. Here, the rectangle is a sleep cycle of a normal subject. So he's going to sleep at 11 p.m. and wake up at 8. And here in red, you have a delayed phase of a patient who are suffering for a delayed sleep phase syndrome. So he's going to sleep about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 a.m. and he wake up at noon. And here, the triangle is the core body temperature. You know that during the night, your temperature, your core body temperature is decreasing and then increasing again before awakening. And if you are exposed to light before this minimum of core body temperature, you will delay the sleep phase. If you are exposed to a light after this core body temperature minimum, you are advancing the sleep-wake phase. So you really pay attention to that because if you have a patient with a very severe sleep phase delay and you expose your patient too early in the morning, you will worsen his disorder and delay his sleep phase disorder. So you have to know and to assess the chronotype of your patient. A second effect to have in mind is the illuminance effect, which is here illustrated by the acute suppressive effects of light and plasma melatonin, so which follow here logistic dose response curves. And so, as you can see, there are very few or no response under 10 lux. So this is really dim light with no response regarding the melatonin phase shift. And then you have a kind of progressive response. And after about 1000 lux, you have a plateau of effects regarding the shift of the melatonin phase. There are also duration effects, which is an important parameter to consider with a dose-dependent, again, response to light. And here you have, again, the phase delay and the melatonin suppression by light. So as you can see, and this is very interesting, even very short or pulse of light, you have already an important response, about kind of 30% of the response, and then a dose-dependent response to light going with the duration to the exposure. And this is the same both for the phase delay or the melatonin suppression. The spectrum wavelength is another parameter influencing light effects, with the red color as low frequency or long wavelength, and blue color at high frequency or low wavelengths. And this slide is just to highlight the fact that melanopsin and melatonin suppression sensitivities are both all maximals in the blue spectrum of wavelengths. And so this is why we are so concerned about the LED, because in LEDs, there are blue and rich lights, and so they are particularly activating the melanopsin system. So this figure summarizes all the parameters and the physiological effects, in fact, directly depending on these light parameters, and in turn explaining the actions of on all these depression subtypes. So, well, when you are prescribing light treatment in patients, the dose is defined by the light irradiance level, the exposure duration, the distance angle from the light source, the timing, and the color. About that, we have to say that the very most of the publications are using white colors, so it is all the spectrum of the colors. There are some papers using blue or blue enriched spectrum that appears to have the same effects that the white color, but there are much less evidence regarding these spectrums. And I don't have the time right now, but regarding other spectrum of light, there are other colors that probably can have other effects. So I detail some of the physiological aspects. Is it so simple in clinical practice in mood disorders? Of course not. And as always, patients, I never had a patient who visit me and say, okay, Dr. Geoffroy, I have a circadian rhythm disorder. It's always hidden there behind a sleep complaint of insomnia or hypersomnia, sleepiness. And this complaint is, of course, a criteria of major depressive episode and is affecting almost all patients with depression. Only 8% do not have sleep complaints in this study where we examine patients with both unipolar and bipolar depression. And after saying that, in fact, there are an infinite number of clinical presentations of this criteria. You can meet patients with sadness, rumination, or sleep onset insomnia, or another patients with irritability, racing thoughts, fragmented sleep, nightmares, visualizations, another patient with weight loss, diminished interest in all sleepiness, another with atypical features with weight gain, hyperphagia, impaired concentration, loss of energy, fatigue, without sleepiness, sleep phase delay, or a postpartum depression with feeling of worthlessness, guilty, early morning awakenings, or the typical seasonal affective disorder linked with photoperiod changes. So all these patients are very different patients, very different clinical manifestations that may explain our suboptimal treatments and lack of specificity of this treatment. For instance, actually in antidepressant studies, when you are testing a new drug, you are grouping all these patients and trying to observe a remission of all these very different clinical manifestations. And here it is a study in bipolar disorders made by a colleague from the USA who demonstrate the main complaint of patients during a 5-year follow-up. So there are many different problems that patients can meet. And also, very interesting message is even during remission, during a long period of time, we were thinking that after treating the depression, or after treating the manic episode, the patients will recover. We know that this is not true. And more than half of patients during remission still suffer from sleep or circadian disturbances that predict relapses and worst outcome. So even during remission, in fact, they are still suffering from the sleep and circadian rhythm disturbances. So with John Gottlieb, we tried to propose and complete the model of Jean Malley regarding so Jean in a first paper in bipolar disorders, in fact, use and remind the model of Émile Kraepelin, I don't know how you pronounce it in German, regarding to come back to primary domains of the bipolar disorder, which are activity, emotion, and cognition. And with John Gottlieb, we propose to add a fourth dimension, which is the sleep dimension, also considered as a primary dimension because present during all the phases, even prodromal phases of the bipolar disorders, and to detail three subdimensions, which are completely different. The sleep physiology in quantity and quality, the wake performance and quality, alertness, sleepiness, and fatigue, and the biological rhythms regarding circadian and seasonal rhythms, especially in mood disorders, because these are very frequent disturbances. And so to be very practical, here is a patient I follow for bipolar disorder. So she has 32 years old. And during the, she was in remission, but complaining from sleep alterations. And during the actigraphy assessment, she met with a relapse, a depressive relapse. And you can see that appear longer sleep duration, but with possible days with insomnia complaints and variability that worsen during the depressive relapse between days of these sleep-wake rhythms. Here is another patient clearly suffering from a sleep phase delay. So she is going to sleep between 3 to 6 a.m. And 1/4 of our patients are suffering for delayed sleep phase disorder. And again, patients never comes to physicians saying that. They always complain from difficulties to fall asleep. So insomnia from the first period of the night. But it's not an insomnia disorder, which, as you know, it's a hyperarousal disorder. Here, it's a clock disorder with very different treatments with chronotherapeutics, whereas insomnia disorder is treated by CBTI or hypnotics, etc. So this is not the same disorders, but patients are complaining from falling asleep and insomnia complaints. But a lot of our bipolar patients are suffering from this delayed sleep phase disorder. Here you have another bipolar patient suffering from the advanced sleep phase disorder. And here another patient suffering from irregular sleep-wake patterns during depression. And we show that this variability of sleep-wake rhythms is evidence also even during the remitted phase. And the time in bed, the sleep duration, the sleep efficiency, and the fragmentation index have a higher variability during remission bipolar disorder compared to healthy subjects. And here are autograms of two subjects just to compare. So this is a snapshot to better understand. There are a lot of papers. But what we understand actually of the bipolar disorder model applied to circadian rhythms and sleep is that some patients, and we will talk a little bit more about that, are presenting some genetic vulnerability and core clock genes, that some polymorphisms that are associated with bipolar disorder. There are some light signaling alterations I will detail just after. These vulnerabilities are leading to circadian rhythms abnormalities, to sleep homeostasis alterations, but also directly to monoaminergic systems alterations that are well known on serotoninergic, noradrenergic, and dopaminergic systems, leading to depressive or manic symptoms. Stress factors, immunity infections can trigger these episodes, but also the seasonal changes, and you are more or less vulnerable to seasons, but also other situations like jet lag, postpartum, night shift, or sleep deprivation can disrupt these rhythms and lead to mood episodes. So regarding light signaling alterations, these are recent meta-analyses that synthesize all studies that show that there are a delayed secretion phase of melatonin and cortisol in patients with bipolar disorder in remission compared to controls. And as I detail, even 1/4 of bipolar patients are even suffering from this delayed sleep phase with wake rhythm disorder. Regarding the hypersensitivity to the light suppression of tests of melatonin that can be observed here is in the publication from Nürnberger. I have to say that this has been a really biomarker that was a great hope of biomarker in bipolar disorder, but very discordant results has been published on this biomarker. The idea was the bipolar patients suppressed more their melatonin secretion in the condition of light compared to control, but results are very discordant. In response to light, we also assessed what is called the post-illumination pupil response to light, which this post-illumination pupil response to light is the proxy of the melanopsin system. And to assess it, we sensibilize the response by a pre-exposition to red and then an exposition to blue light. And you are measuring the size of the pupil response. And after a blue exposition, your pupil do not come back to the baseline constriction. And what is observed very briefly is in seasonal affective disorder, but also is depression without seasonal pattern, there are a reduced response to light, a reduced PIPR in both donc, seasonal and non-seasonal depressions. And here with Héloïse Rack and Patrice Bourgin, we also confirm this observation in idiopathic hypersomnia with long sleep, here in orange versus controls in green here. So here is a PIPR with again reduced compared to controls after the blue exposition. And you know that this hypersomnia is really a common feature of the seasonal affective disorder in patients. And here is another paper where we also look at patients with narcolepsy, another central hypersomnia, showing also a decreased PIPR in narcolepsy. Donc, a kind of all central hypersomnia has this reduced response to light. And of note, narcolepsy patients have also baseline pupil diameter, which is decreased compared to controls or idiopathic hypersomnia patients. So this reduced response to light is common to depression and to central hypersomnia. And the more sleepiness you are, and the more sensitive to light you also are, and this was interesting. Really surprising also observation is that during mania, so the opposite clinical manifestation, you have an opposite response of the pupil with increased light response, increased PIPR, and the more you are manic, here, and the more increased is your response to blue light with a more increased constriction of this pupil. Donc exactly the opposite of the depression. And in fact, in clinical practice, it makes sense. Patients who are in manic state knows that the light push them and increase their energy, and they often protect from light with sunglasses or other things. There are also a lot of studies looking at the retina response of patients, and Marc Eber and his team in Canada works a lot on this aspect. You have in roads a diminished response in cones and roads in patients with depression, and a normalization of this response here in orange after being treated by antidepressants. And exactly the same is observed with light treatment, mostly in cones. In genetic, a lot of core clock genes on some polymorphisms in SNPs have been associated with the bipolar disorders vulnerabilities. Some has looked at and has done what is called the reverse phenotyping. So this is to look at risk genotype on some core clock genes and to look at the clinical manifestations associated with this at-risk genotype for bipolar disorders. And so the known at-risk genotype the known at-risk genotype for bipolar disorders on timeless is associated with a more Vesperal chronotype and Languide type. We show that with Bruno et al. And on RORA with a more, so this is in French here, sorry, a more rigid the circadian type. Here on the ASMT, one of the enzyme coding for melatonin, the at-risk genotype was associated with a poorer sleep assessed by actigraphy. Francesco Benedetti here show that the at-risk polymorphism on clock was associated assessed with actigraphy with a more evening activity, a delayed sleep phase, and reduced sleep durations. And some of these variants are associated also to the response either to antidepressants or to lithium. The good news is, as you know, and you are probably studying, a lot of chronotherapeutics that can target, in fact, these different levels. And probably even traditional treatments are also affecting some of these levels. And just for instance, lithium, which is really the cornerstone treatment in bipolar disorders, is a well-known chronobiological agent. These effects are observed in more than a dozen of species. Depending on the study or conditions, phase delay or period lengthening can be observed. Some epigenetics modulation have been observed with an increased expression of some genes with lithium and a decrease of their expression or a decrease of their expression. And also some pharmacogenetic studies show that some of these variants on these core clock genes have been associated to the response or known response to lithium. So when logically the light therapy could be used, here with Laura Palladini, we summarize depending on the unipolar or bipolar depression, but there are a lot of review on it. But briefly, the idea in bipolar depression is to increase slowly to avoid a manic shift that can be observed, to really keep the lamp at high level. It is better to use the full light spectrum because, as I said, there are more evidence on the wide spectrum of the light, but some studies show some efficacy on the blue and rich light. In unipolar depression, the exposition should be during the morning, whereas in bipolar depression, some studies, for instance, from Dorothy Seat, propose to use it at midday with maybe less cases of manic switches. The exposition should be daily at regular schedules during at least 1 or 4 weeks to have a first response. And some patients, as the verbatims I share with you, observe response since the first days. And the duration, there are very few studies about the duration of the treatment. So you can propose to continue until the reduction of depressive symptoms or to maintain during at least 1 year to avoid a rapid relapse, like for antidepressant drugs. And for seasonal patterns, it is until the period of the usual spontaneous remission during spring or summer. There are some studies proposing it as a prevention strategy. In bipolar disorder, it's always only with a mood stabilizer with anti-manic properties. So this is really important. And always you have to check for ophthalmic disorders, especially retina disorders, if there are something or adopt, or you just ask for an ophthalmologic advice before prescribing the light treatment. Donc, we made a systematic review trying to summarize the studies that compared light treatment to antidepressants, because one of the problem of the transfer to clinical practice is that my colleagues were saying that, okay, Pierre, you are saying that light have physiological effects very clear in all species, etc., etc. But what about the comparison with other antidepressant drugs? Because I know that antidepressants are working, and I don't want to lose chances with my patients. So we made a meta-analysis to compare the antidepressant effect of light treatment as a first-line treatment compared to other antidepressants. And so, as you can see here, 7 studies compared light treatment and antidepressant as first-line treatment. And what this meta-analysis show is that light therapy versus antidepressants have similar effects as first-line treatment, and that the combination of the two, of light treatment and antidepressant versus antidepressant, the combination is more efficient with a moderate effect size compared to antidepressant alone. And this was true in non-seasonal depressions also. But there are a lot of personalization that can be made with light treatment. Regarding the seasonal pattern or not, the chronotype, the unipolar or bipolar switch, the titration, the sleepiness or insomnia, the duration of symptoms, the question of the maintenance treatment, the combination with other drugs, the combination with other chronotherapeutics, and so there are a lot of studies to continue, because real life with chronotherapeutics is to combine chronotherapeutics between them and not to do only light treatment or only melatonin or only sleep education, etc., etc. And for instance, regarding the chronotype, Michael Terman and Anna Verjustis, for instance, here propose regarding your circadian phase and your dim light melatonin onset to adapt the start of the light treatment depending on your responses on the morning-evening questionnaire or Neosberg. This is a really good table, but there are some limitations, and it is feasible in clinical practice and in real life only if patients are short sleepers. In long sleepers, it is impossible to do. And if it's not possible, and for instance, in patients suffering from an increased total sleep time, you can start later during their natural wake up and advance gradually the time exposure. Another interesting effect could be to improve sleepiness during depression. And we made this study with Henri Conté to healthy individuals who were sleep deprived during a night. The SD was mostly for night workers who have to come back home after a sleep night privation. And we made a crossover design and randomization with two light devices, these glasses and the box, and a control light, so under 10 lux, as I detailed just before. And what we observed regarding the sleepiness score is after the exposition by light, patients with both light glasses in black or with light box in gray has a decrease of their sleepiness score, so were less sleepiness than controls, and these effects were maintained. Here, it's it's my only slide about tolerance, because in fact, after a sleep privation, as you have may experience, this is where your tolerance is really the poor. And so even after a total night privation, a total sleep night privation, the tolerance to light from these healthy individuals were good and not different between the devices. Here is another meta-analysis we made regarding the effect of the light treatment on insomnia disorder. I have to say that there are not so much studies, but what we show in these 6 studies is that light treatment for insomnia disorder, and in the study we made, depending on the subtype of insomnia, what are the evidence actually. There we observed an improvement, significant improvement of the wake after sleep onset, so less nocturnal awakenings, objectively of 11 minutes and subjectively on sleep diary of 36 minutes. And we did not observe differences for sleep latency, total sleep time, or sleep efficiency. So with Francesco Benedetti, Carmen Schroeder, Anna Virjustis, and Patrice Bourgin, we try to make a call to action because we think that there is a gap, and data shows that there is a gap between the physiological and scientific and medical evidence and the practice. And there are so many drugs who are drugs or neuromodulation techniques, etc., who are widely used and with a much less level of evidence. We made this call to action, and probably because there is this resistance, because there is a lack of knowledge of mechanisms and response rates relative to reference drugs, and we hope that this all this new data and evidence will help to change education and practices. There are many perspectives, but I don't have time. Just to say that probably one of the avenues is to follow up on daily and ecological conditions patients regarding the depressive symptoms. Here, thanks to artificial intelligence, we manage with about 100 markers to identify biosignatures for each patient. So each patient has his biosignature assessed and trained during the 3 months, and we managed to predict the 3 later months with a 90% of efficacy. So this is possible to have a biosignature of patients, and this longitudinal follow-up with biomarkers assessing activity, but also heart rate, breathing, sleep, will probably allow to intervene early, to act early on patients, to propose chronotherapeutics early depending on these biomarkers. And what will be really, really important is that there are very, very few studies looking at the relapse moment, the moment where patients will present with a mood relapse. And in practice, patients are able to identify a new episode. They are telling that they are sleeping more poorly, they are waking more often, they are feeling kind of aggressivity, irritation, and when they are feeling that, they know that in 2 days or 1 week, they will meet with a relapse. And these symptoms are identified, this is the data, are identified by patients and predict an imminent transition to a mood episode. So we call that the Chronos syndrome because the Chronos in Greek mythology was a god who personifies time and predicts the future. He was able to travel over time and predict what will happen. And so the Chronos syndrome could be this clinical entity that predicts an imminent progression to a mood relapse. And this syndrome, if we are able to educate patients to identify what are these symptoms that will predict a relapse in these patients, and most of the time, and many of these symptoms are sleep or circadian rhythm symptoms of alterations, we may be able to act with chronotherapeutics, for instance, to either avoid a full-blown episode or even to have no symptoms at all. So the assessments of the sleep domain in this very heterogeneous population suffering from depression may lead to more personalized therapeutic strategies. The light signaling alteration may exist in subgroups of patients. And this is a promising pathway to better examine in these patients. This may help to find new markers of depression and of response to light therapies. We don't know what are or don't are the patients who respond to light treatment. We are trying in patients and observing or not a response. Light efficacy depends on the dose. So the light irradiance level, the exposure duration, the distance and angle from light source, the timing and the spectrum wavelengths. There are many clinical features that can be used to personalize the light treatment at the individual level. There are many, many unknowns, but maybe the promise of a true precision medicine. And finally, I would like to thank all the clinical team working on these subjects and the research team also at NeuroDidro working with me. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to discuss.